So, there's this massive U.S. military force gathering near Venezuela. The official story? It's all about fighting drugs and promoting democracy. But what if that's not the real story? Today, we're going to dive into an analysis by Professor Jeffrey Sachs that argues there's something else entirely driving the largest U.S. military operation in the Caribbean in 30 years.
Okay, so let's just get a sense of the scale we're talking about here. It's been 30 years. 30 since the U.S. has put together this kind of military power in the region. Let's be clear, this isn't some minor patrol. This is a historically huge deployment.
So what are we actually looking at here? I mean, we're talking carrier strike groups, advanced warships, and over 100,000 troops moving into position. A force that big, right on Venezuela's doorstep, that needs a pretty serious explanation, right?
So what is the official line? Washington has its reasons, of course, but the analysis we're digging into today, it argues those reasons are, well, basically a smokescreen for a totally different agenda.
Okay, so the official goals are basically two things. First, fighting international drug trafficking. They're even calling Venezuelan President Maduro a narco-terrorist. And second, promoting democracy in the country. And look, on the surface, that all sounds pretty noble, right?
But here's where the analysis says that whole drug trafficking story starts to fall apart. And it's not just an opinion, it's using official data from the DEA and the UN to make the case. Just follow the flow here for a second. Fentanyl precursors, mostly coming from China through Mexico. Cocaine, mainly flowing through Colombia and Mexico. See what's kind of missing from that picture? Yeah, according to the data, there's no major drug route coming through Venezuela.
And this, right here, really highlights what the source sees as a massive contradiction. On one side, you have the U.S. potentially justifying an invasion by calling Maduro a narco-terrorist. But on the other side, the former president of Honduras, a guy convicted in a New York court for trafficking 400 tons of cocaine, is reportedly being considered for a presidential pardon. The analysis we're looking at basically says, look, the logic here just doesn't add up.
So if the official story is a smokescreen, what's really going on? According to this analysis, the answer is simple. It's powerful, and it's buried deep underground. Yep, it's all about oil.
And let's be absolutely crystal clear about what we're talking about here. Venezuela is sitting on the largest proven oil reserves in the world. That's more than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia. That one fact, all by itself, makes Venezuela one of the most strategically important pieces of real estate on the entire planet.
And, for more than 20 years, this has been at the very heart of the conflict. The Venezuelan government has insisted on national sovereignty over its resources. That statement right there, that the oil belongs to the Venezuelan people, not to foreign corporations, that, according to Sachs's analysis, is the one thing Washington just can't stomach.
And this idea of just taking the oil by force, apparently, it's not new at all. The analysis points back to 2017. When President Trump reportedly asked his advisors, hey, why don't I just invade Venezuela? So this suggests what we're seeing now isn't some spur-of-the-moment reaction, but maybe, just maybe, the final act of a plan that's been on the table for a long, long time.
But wait, it gets more complicated. According to this analysis, it's not just about the oil. There's a much bigger game of geopolitical chess going on here, and the U.S. is using Venezuela as a piece on the board to send a message to its biggest rivals, especially Russia. Okay, just look at how these events line up. In March, Russia and Cuba sign a new military deal. By June, Russian submarines are sitting in Cuban waters, something Russia itself called a symmetrical retaliation for U.S. involvement in Ukraine. And then, just 2 months later, the U.S. starts this massive buildup. The source argues that timing is, well, it's anything but a coincidence.
So what's the playbook here? The analysis points way back to 1823 to something called the Monroe Doctrine. Basically, it's this old idea that the entire Western Hemisphere is America's backyard and other big powers should just stay out. We're talking about 19th century thinking being dusted off and used in the 21st century. So what's the unspoken message here? What's the real signal being sent? The analysis suggests that by flexing all this military muscle right here in the Caribbean, the U.S. is basically screaming at Russia and China, this hemisphere is ours. And the implied deal? Maybe, just maybe, it's you stay out of our backyard and we'll think about not meddling so much in yours. That's really important to understand that what's happening with Venezuela, it didn't just pop up out of nowhere. The source connects it to this long, long history of U.S. intervention in Latin America, a pattern that almost always kicks in when American corporate or strategic interests get challenged.
And according to this view, this has been the playbook for more than 100 years. When a canal was needed in Panama, the U.S. helped create the country. When Guatemala's government stood up to the United Fruit Company, it was overthrown. When Chile nationalized its copper mines, a military coup followed. The analysis basically says Venezuela is just the latest chapter in a very old story.
And look, before you even get to the warships, the main weapon has been economic. Since 2015, U.S. sanctions have shrunk Venezuela's economy by a staggering 70%. 70! To put that into perspective for you, the source points out that's an economic collapse worse than the Great Depression in the U.S. Just think about that.
So where does this leave us? What does all of this really mean? When you peel back all the layers, the official stories, the geopolitics, what do you actually see? The source argues we're seeing the true nature of global power, with the mask completely off.
So the core argument here is that the official reason, this war on drugs thing, isn't just a weak excuse, it's a complete pretext. It's a story so thin it barely covers up what this analysis calls a straight-up power play for resources and control of the region.
And this all leads to a pretty bleak conclusion about the way the world actually works. Because if a superpower can just assemble an invasion force to take over another country's resources and face no real pushback, then, as Professor Sachs puts it, this rules-based system we all love to talk about, it doesn't really exist. It's just a nice idea.
And that leaves us with one final, very provocative question that this analysis puts on the table. The question isn't whether Trump will invade. The question is there anyone who will stop him?